Hey everybody, Bobby Klink from Your Online Genius here. Wanted to go live today to address a question, a really good question that I got asked by someone who actually downloaded the Ultimate Stock Image Guide and watched my video about that, where I walked through the 3 issues you need to worry about from a copyright perspective in getting the right kind of license to an image. The person reached out, asked me a couple of questions. I'm going to address one today and one tomorrow, either tomorrow or Friday, depending on the timing and some other things I have going on. But what this has to do with is, do you need to worry about issues other than copyright when it comes to stock images? So today we're going to take up the right to publicity, and tomorrow or Friday we're going to take up trademark issues, and whether you need to worry about trademark issues as well. So before we get to that, again, if you're new to me, don't know who I am, I'm Bobby Klink. I am an online entrepreneur and an intellectual property lawyer. I'm the person who began this business, Your Online Genius. I did it to create these resources and free information to try to educate online entrepreneurs about what they need to be thinking about in terms of legal issues to make sure they're not at risk. So that's who I am. And the business, Your Online Genius, was formed out of a frustration I kept seeing of constantly seeing clients who had made mistakes when they couldn't afford to hire me by the hour, or really any other lawyer by the hour. And they were trying to do it themselves, and they didn't know how to do it themselves. So I offered these, or came up with the idea to create this company to educate people, to provide resources, to provide information, to help them do it themselves at the outset. So that's what the business is about. Now, again, what I said is what we're going to talk about today is a little bit further dive on what you need to be thinking about in terms of stock images. And stock images are, bread and butter of what, online entrepreneurs use. Yeah, we would like to have, custom images we take for everything, but we're not going to be able to. I use a lot of stock images in various presentations I make because, they get the point across. And look, I'm not a professional photographer, so I can't take professional, images or pictures for everything I need. So we're going to use that. We have to. And another piece of it is, so the question is, what do you have to do? And what I addressed in the ultimate guide that I have out there that you can get, and you can, there's a link in this post where you can get it, is about the copyright issues and what you need to look for in a license on a copyright basis to make sure that the copyright holder isn't going to sue you. So that is, in a sense, the most important piece, and it's the most important piece because it will always be an issue for every stock image. No matter what, you need to make sure you're getting the appropriate copyright license, okay? But again, someone who got a copy of that asked me a question about, hey, what about publicity rights and what about trademark issues? They didn't use that word, but that was what they were asking me about. And so I said, hey, let me come up with a line, let's do it. So today, we're going to talk about the right to publicity. And the particular question that this person asked was, well, and this is a person, the person who asked me the question actually is a photographer and takes pictures and submits to stock photo sites, I guess, and does these other things. So this person understood the process and said, well, what about model releases? And if you don't know what that is, it doesn't surprise me because I wouldn't expect you to. What a model release is that's if you have a person in the image, you should get them to sign a release. The photographer should do that because those people have a right to publicity. And so the question is, do you need to look for that in your stock images? Do you need to be sure you have it? And that's the question I'm going to address today. And it's a part of the broader concept of when do you need written releases, etc. Now, in your business personally, you should definitely get those releases. If you're taking pictures of people that you're going to use, get a release. You've heard me say this in other places probably. If you are having people on your podcast, get a release from them. If you are having people guest post on your blog, get a release from them. If you are going to have people submit testimonials, get a release from them. Because you can do that. It's simple, straightforward, no problem, do it. Okay? Because you just should. It's easy. It's lawyer repellent when you get these written agreements in place because there just can't be a dispute down the line. And so that's why you want to do it. That's why you should do it. And that's why it really isn't something that you should think twice about in creating your own content. The problem comes up, however, when you're using stock photography, because you don't control what the photographer did. Did the photographer get the right releases? Did they get model releases at all? Some websites will tell you yes or no. Some websites won't even tell you. And so you have to make a decision on what you want to do. And the reason this comes up is, again, the right to publicity. And the right to publicity is a right that is not uniform across the country. It's different by state. Each state will have its own what's called common law, which that's not even written law. That's just decisions by courts over time that have built up and created kind of general concepts. And then some states will have statutes that say, hey, here are the rules. A lot of states have a statute, but then the common law also applies. So it's a mess. I mean, it is a very complicated question. So that's why, again, if I'm doing it in the first instance, I'm going to be very careful to get, rock solid releases anytime I do anything, just to avoid any issue no matter what. Because if I have a written release from people that says I can use it for any and all purposes, and, have the right language, I'm good. But the problem is that if you find yourself in a situation where you don't know that, are you going to be in trouble? And the answer is, unfortunately, it depends. And what I mean by that is some states have a requirement that if an image or a name or a likeness, so if you want to use someone's name, a picture of them or their likeness, so something that it's clearly them, for a commercial use, you have to have a written agreement. New York State, for example, I believe is one state that has a law that says that. So that means you have to have an actual written document releasing it, or technically if you use it, you're violating it. So what does that mean? Well, it would mean, and again, this is a question that would vary by state, but well, did you take the picture there or not? Or is it the New York law that applies, or is it some other state's law? Because in some states, you don't have to have a written release. You can have implicit or implied consent, which makes sense. And let's think about this from a stock photography perspective. Well, actually, let me back up. I use the example of my podcast example. Hey, if someone agrees to come onto my podcast, they can't then complain that I released my podcast interview with them, even if I don't have a signed publicity release, because they implicitly agreed that I could use their name, their image, their likeness, etc., because they gave it to me for that purpose. So they can't really complain about it. But so let's think of that in the stock photography world. Well, if someone is a model who goes to, and is likely being paid, but goes to a place where they are having their picture taken clearly for the purpose of stock photography, they can't exactly complain that it's then used for stock photography. I mean, they have implicitly agreed to that. The problem, like I said, is that in some states, that's not good enough. In some states, they have to actually sign a document agreeing that you can use it. So again, they would sign it with the photographer, and then the photographer would have that. And again, if the photographer does it right, they will have a broad release that gives them unlimited rights for all uses, etc. And then no problem, it's done. Okay, so that's where we are. That's what the law is. And so what are you, an online entrepreneur, to do? Well, what I would say is, here's the problem. If you go to a place like most of the paid sites, like Shutterstock, for example, doing just a bit of research, you'll see, and I believe it's Shutterstock, requires that any photographer upload a copy of a model release. So if they have a person in the image that is identifiable, they have to upload a copy of a model release that they had that person sign. Okay, so at a place like that, you're going to know that it's allowed. Okay, what I will tell you is I have not seen that at any of the free sites. Most of the free sites, just they don't care, they don't worry about it. It might be that the photographer does have a release. It might be that they don't. It might be that they're in a state where they're required to. It might be they're in a state where they're not. And you're not gonna know. And so the question is, what should you do? And what I'll tell you is, if you download those images, and again, what I'll say, there's these other limits. If you're using it in a blog post, That's most likely going to be editorial use, not commercial use. So you're fine. The real trouble comes up if you use it directly in advertising. If you were to use it, on a product, so if you have a digital product and you download an image and use it as the cover of your physical product you're selling, something like that is where you're most likely to have an issue. But so if you're using stock photos there that have people, ideally you're going to have a model release and you're going to make sure you do. The problem is if you start worrying about this, you're not going to be able to get your images from most of the free websites. You're going to have to pay. And so you have to make a business decision of, does the risk outweigh the benefit? What I would tell you is I use stock images that I've downloaded from free sites on my website, on a lot of different places, because look, the fact is that if I was worried about that, and if I was going to say I would never use an image unless I could get, and this is advice some lawyers will give you, unless I could get my hands on an actual copy of the signed release, I wouldn't have much luck. I wouldn't be able to actually get much out of this. And again, the chances that anyone is ever going to come after me, someone who is a model in stock photography, they clearly intended to do that, is going to sue me for using an image that has them in it as stock photography, is pretty darn low. I would say it's almost non-existent. Most of the publicity rights issues come up in the context not of stock photography, but in the context of someone, a business, like explicitly using a celebrity or someone who appears somewhere else. So, I've talked before in the social media context, the right to publicity case. One of the famous ones is when a pharmacy tweeted about Katherine Heigl appearing, or going to the store and talked about how even she, used their brand or something like that. So that is a classic case because you're appropriating their celebrity and almost implying an endorsement, right? So that's a problem. Or another case, a famous case out of Chicago, a business used, I think it was the time when Michael Jordan was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. And they use that to take out an ad congratulating him, but then also kind of doing it as a marketing ploy. And so that's a case. Again, that's where you have a celebrity and you're not using a stock photo. You're using that person's celebrity to try to sell your product. That's where you're normally going to have an issue. So it just isn't going to be an issue where stock photography, you're likely to have this problem if it's true stock photography. Now you have to be careful, and this is why, when you go to a place like a Pixabay or a Pexels, where, you look, the stock photography is clearly stock photography. There's really no question about that. You see that, you know it, you understand what's happening. So you're pretty clearly, aware of what's going on there, and you don't have these huge, concerns where they didn't know. Some of the other ones, you'll see images of people that are more artsy, right? Where, I have friends who are photographers, so I could see maybe they took those pictures and then put them up, and maybe they didn't think to get a model release, and maybe these people didn't know that this was going to be put up on websites. So, you got to be careful. You have to think it through. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to make some decisions, and the chances of you running into trouble from not having, the photographer not having gotten a model release signed when they took a stock photo are pretty low. It just is one of those things. I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. I don't worry about it in my own business. Again, part of the problem is, I'm not using anyone famous. I'm not using it in a defamatory way. What are they going to come after me for? They're going to come after me because I, have something on a blog post, or I have something in a webinar presentation. What's the damage to them? So again, those are the things where I'm just not going to worry about it personally. It's a decision you have to make. You are candidly running some legal risk by doing it. Because you don't know, you can't be 100% sure that you're safe and that you don't have some exposure, but the chance of it ever coming back to haunt you, you got a lot of bigger things to worry about, like, actually making money And so if you have to make the decision between, having to spend 5 hours trying to find a single photograph to use versus grabbing one that is fine in every other way, but you're just not sure if you have the model release or if it's a problem or any of those things, and you can get that in 5 seconds, I think you're probably better off as a business person making the cost benefit analysis. Again, you're taking a risk, but it should be a calculated risk. So that's it for today. Tomorrow or Friday, I don't know which, we'll be addressing a separate issue of using trademarked images. What if there is a clear trademark in one of these stock photos? Do you have to think about that issue? So I'll deal with that in the next video. In the meantime, if you haven't gotten your hands on the Ultimate Stock Image Guide, which is about copyright issues, there's a link in this post where you can do that. It's got kind of the 3 factors or the 3 key elements you need to see in a copyright license. And I've got a dozen websites listed that are free sites that their license meets those requirements. So you can take a look at them and you can feel safe, at least on copyright grounds, that you don't have a problem there. That's it for today. See you either tomorrow or Friday with the trademark issue. In the meantime, if you have questions, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to address them. That's why I'm doing these videos. So I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.